What's up, Popaholics? I wanted to take a break from my usual type of video and talk a little bit about some of the lines I wish Funko would produce. Like, if I could get them to do anything, if I was Funko's boss, these are the lines I would want them to make. I've done one of these videos before, and I'll link that below if you're interested in watching that before this one, but these are 5 more lines I would like them to make. Also, most of these properties aren't exactly kid-friendly, so if you're a little young, maybe you shouldn't watch this one. James Bond is one of those things that goes from being super silly and ridiculous and just completely unbelievable to being badass and just awesome. There aren't too many franchises that get me as excited to go watch in the theaters as James Bond. Of course, I would want them to make Sean Connery's version of James Bond with the cigarette in his mouth and the tuxedo, because that is one of the most iconic images and characters in movie history. A lot of people don't like the Roger Moore era, but I do. I like it because it is campy and it is silly, and some of the movies are so bad that they're good. And I would want him in one of these like 70s style suits that he wears, just so it's not the same as the Sean Connery one. And besides the fast cars, stunts, and hot women, the best part about James Bond are the villains, and the most iconic one is probably Blofeld, and he would look cool as a pop with that big scar on his face and holding his white cat. That would be pretty awesome. The Roger Moore era created some pretty campy ass villains, and Jaws is probably the campiest and dumbest one of them all, but any James Bond fan likes Jaws. I mean, look, it's so silly. It's just a character that's really big and he has like metal teeth, and at one point he bites a car that James Bond's in. I mean, he bites it and he takes it apart with his teeth. It's ridiculous. And I think in one of the movies he defeats him with like a big magnetic crane and it hoists him up by the teeth. It's so silly, but I love Jaws, and he's definitely one of the ones I would want them to make. Live and Let Die had a lot of cool villains in it, and Baron Zomedy isn't the main villain. He is just one of the henchmen, but he's got a really cool design. He's a voodoo priest, and I think he would look really cool as a pop with that skeletal paint job and that top hat and the rags on him. I think he would look really cool, especially if they had him holding some snakes and stuff too. That would be great. Dr. No, besides having the coolest name ever, was the first megalomaniac that James Bond ever faced on the big screen. So I would definitely want a pop of him. He's a little bit plain, but if they give him a good hair sculpt and that classic evil jumpsuit that he wears, it would look pretty cool. Dr. No. Don't ask him to do anything because you know that motherfucker's gonna say no. And finally, I would want my favorite henchman of all time, Xenia Onatopp, played by Famke Janssen. This was the first time I saw Famke Janssen, and man, did I get a crush on her. She was so sexy as this character. And her name is funny. It's like Onatopp, and basically she kills dudes by getting on top of them and crushing them with the massive force of her thighs. It's really silly, but totally memorable, and definitely would want a pop of her. Point Break is probably something they would never do. I don't know how many people like this movie, but to me, it's that perfect combination of 80s and 90s action flick. It's very corny. Like, the main character's name is Johnny Utah. It's pretty dumb. And he goes undercover as like a surfer. It's just completely unbelievable, but it also has some really great action and one of the best bank heists ever put on film. What I would want the most out of a Point Break Funko Pop line are the ex-presidents. I think they would look totally awesome as pops holding their guns with the oversized masks that would, I think, lend themselves to the pop style because of the oversized heads. It might be a little challenging to do the eyes because I guess you'd have to make it look kind of like a mask, but I guess they can do that by having 2 tones, on the skin towards the back there. It'd be quite a challenge for a sculptor, but a fun one, I think. The ex-presidents would be cool enough, but if they made Bodhi in a wetsuit holding a surfboard, that would be awesome. And of course, Johnny and Tyler holding surfboards as well. I don't watch too many anime shows because for the most part, I find them sort of annoying and childish. But Berserk is one of the more serious ones that's totally gory, totally epic, and has some really great character design. Even though the show has more depth, I do like the designs that they came out with in the new movies called The Golden Arc, and I would definitely want Gut with his huge broadsword, or Claymore. I think it would look really cool as a pop with the spiky hair and the scar over his nose, And there's just a lot of detail in that body that I think would look really nice in pop form. And there isn't too many pops that have that medieval kind of look to it, so I think this would be a really good series to do. A helmeted action pose version of Guts would be cool too, with this big red cape. That would be a nice variant to have. And Casca is one of my favorite characters of all time. She's very strong and sexy. Really like her design with the kind of Spanish style armor, and I think she would look great as a pop as well. And to round out the trinity of main characters for Berserk, Griffith, I think he would look really striking as a pop with that white hair and that shiny armor, and maybe make his eyes blue. That would look really nice. But he also does have one of the coolest helmets in the show, because it kind of looks like a hawk beak. Really nice. And yeah, I think these three characters would just look excellent as pops. Battle Royale is probably one of the most twisted books and movies I have ever seen. I don't like the sequels too much, but the original Battle Royale never gets old. It's ultra violent, it's ultra crazy, and kind of thought-provoking as well. It's basically about a future society where the kids are a bunch of little punks, and in order to keep them in line, they select one class from Japan to go on an island and basically fight it out to the death until only one survives. It's kind of interesting. They put these explosive collars on them if they decide not to participate, so they can move them from quadrant to quadrant, so they're forced to fight. They give them a duffel bag of supplies with one weapon in there, and the weapons are random. Sometimes you can get a gun, sometimes you get something dumb like a flashlight. It's pretty interesting. You definitely got to have the main character Shuya, and he should be holding a pot lid. Yeah, that was the weapon they gave him, was a pot lid, so he was pretty unlucky. I would also want Chigusa in her yellow running suit holding a knife, and definitely with that cut on her face and bleeding. And Mitsuko, who's probably tied for the most evil character in the entire movie. They also mix in two older senior characters into the movie, along with the younger kids, and Shogo Kawada is the first one. He's a total badass, and he would look cool as a pop with that headband on and his blue uniform. And the other older kid and main villain is Katsuo, and I would definitely want him holding a machine gun, and just in that black uniform of his, I think he would look pretty badass. And probably a variant of him with his uniform all torn up and him crying blood out of his eyes would look awesome. And lastly, and probably the coolest one, would be the training girl from the video they show the kids before they send them out to go kill each other. It's one of my favorite sequences in the movie. She's just in the training video, but it's done in like this happy-go-lucky kind of way. It's really kind of a fascinating scene.
それからもう一つ大事なこと。このゲームにはタイムリミットがあります。3日間です。3日戦っても最後の1人が決まらない場合、全部の首は自動的に爆発します。優勝者はありません。せっかくだからみんなベストを尽くして戦って、絶対にそんなことにならないようにね。
Jackie Brown, in my opinion, is one of Tarantino's most underrated movies. I think it's just as good as Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. It's right up there for me. And it has some of his most memorable characters. Jackie Brown, I would want in her flight attendant uniform and holding the bag of money. I think that is the most memorable version of her in the movie. Max Cherry, the slippery Bales bondsman, may seem to be kind of a plain character, but I think if they gave him some age lines on the pop, it could be very interesting looking. Kind of like the age lines they gave the Luke Skywalker pop from The Force Awakens. I think that might be pretty cool. And definitely one of my favorite characters of all time, Ordell Roby. I really, really want this guy as a pop, and I think I would want him with that baby blue Kangol, holding a cigarette, those blue pants, just looking real slick, definitely some gold on him. He is such a crafty and kind of evil character. I just love him. And Lewis, straight out of the pen, would be great, especially if he was holding that black dragon bong. They'd never do it, but it would be a great pop. People like Melanie in real life are super annoying and super toxic, but in a movie setting, they're very interesting, and she is one of my favorite Tarantino characters, and you couldn't have a Jackie Brown pop line without Melanie. Alright guys, that was 5 of my most wanted Funko Pop lines that I just wish they would make. They probably never will, because I don't think any of these things are very popular anymore, but it's fun to think about, it's fun to imagine what they would look like. So what do you guys think? Or what lines would you like them to make? Let me know in the comments below, and you guys take it easy.
Looking back, a morning comes, don't find your face in your grass. Take the moonlight by the tags or any such a shade.